what our projections are, you'll see the COVID line currently has encumbered 187,910 and has spent 647,063 for a total on that particular line, which is just the account line, which is a netted account line of 834,973. And then I made that, try to make it as clear as possible that this balance is the ledger account in the that is unbudgeted, that we still need to cover or transfer some funds, whether it's through the 2% reserve at the town or other account lines. At the end of the year, we're going to have to cover that. Moving is, well, any questions specifically on the financials?
I've got a couple on turnover. Is that looking like it will?
I still haven't received the turnover from personnel yet, but my understanding is that we're okay in that category, but I haven't seen any of the actual numbers yet.
Okay, meaning approaching what we'd budgeted, not like a windfall there.
So far, I believe we can cover what we budgeted, but I don't have the specifics.
And then is special education department running within budget at this early point?
Currently within budget. It all depends on what state reimbursement we get for the ECR. That's a huge amount to have to make up to keep that budget whole.
Sean,
first filing for ECR is December.
Any other questions on the financial update from Ken?
Yeah, I had a quick question on the athletic fund budget.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like they have a surplus of about $1 million, just shy of $1 million. I mean, that seems like that's available to transfer to cover some of the unexpected COVID expenses, et cetera. Am I reading that incorrectly?
You are reading that incorrectly at this point.
Could you help me?
There is no transfer from athletics back at this point unless we change the process that we currently have budgeted and have followed in the past. That is a discussion that we have started, and we have some recommendations and some thought process that we'll be looking at in order to.
Okay, so currently, what happens to that $1 million that's unspent in athletics right now?
It stays in the athletic fund as a fund.
Okay, so if when we're budgeting this year, if let's say we stay flat at $1.1 million funding, we would reduce it by the approximately $1 million that's in there now.
It's a conversation to have.
No. I mean, if we roll forward, if we kept the process the same.
Yeah, it's a conversation to have as to how you want to budget athletics for next year, looking at where they stand this year.
Okay, but I want to understand the process in the past. So if this had happened in a prior year, I understand we're changing it and we're having a whole discussion on that. But in the past, how would this $1 million have been accounted for?
It would stay in the athletic fund itself.
Okay. And then when we were budgeting, so then he would
have
$1 million
budgeting, he would
next
bring
year?
forward his total expenditures and what he estimates for other revenue.
Okay.
And the delta of that would be what the board normally would put in their budget as a contribution to the athletic fund.
So Margaret, is that how that would have worked? So we would have reduced, the board would have reduced his board contribution less his remainder from the prior year?
Yeah, I believe in the past 3 years, I don't believe last year, but the prior 2 years, what was it, Dawn? We did take some money from the fund to reduce our contribution. It was like 18,000 and 17,000. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
He normally would only have maybe 30,000, 20,000, 19,000 in the past left over in his fund balance. So it really was minimal compared to what has happened for this year and for the year we just completed.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand. I just wanted to understand the process. So that's just a piece of that puzzle that it's important to remember as we're continuing the conversation going forward.
Yep.
On that athletic fund spreadsheet, the two columns say year-to-date September, comparing 2020 to 2021. Should that be year-to-date October, or are we still missing the October update on that spreadsheet?
You are correct. It should say October. Nope, that is
Okay.
October's numbers.
Okay, so through October of this year, we are spending, we're spending in athletics is only about $48,000 below what it was through October of last year.
Correct.
Okay.
That is true. However, if you also look at where we were last year, we were fall participation fees were 105,800 that was collected, and a small amount for rental revenue was collected. We've not received any extra revenue or other additional revenue for the athletic funds this year yet.
And I think to Ken's point, if we get closer to the end of the year and there is a significant balance in this athletics fund, is there any, other than not being past practice, is there anything that would stop us from using any overage here to cover some of the COVID underage that we may see?
Let me give that some thought. I don't want to say yes or no. Usually once the money is in that fund, it stays within the fund. Can it be voted to be removed from the fund? Yes. It is definitely a discussion that we can have. I would say that on the general fund side, the COVID lines, any additional funds at the end of the year can be transferred to cover the COVID line. As for athletics, I'd have to look into that a little bit more.
So it's only past practice that's stopping us from treating athletics like every other part of the budget.
It's the way the fund was set up 20 something years ago that has been functioning this way ever since.
But also our board contribution doesn't cover all of the expenses of the athletic budget, right?
Correct.
Correct.
If
Correct.
we're not making gate receipts, or we don't know our spring participation yet, we may need our full board contribution at the end of the year to cover
That's
athletic.
Any other questions on the financial report ending October 31, or should we move to transfers?
Moving on.
Okay.
Not a lot of transfers here.
There's not, but there's one very important one I want to bring to your attention. The very first transfer I have on there is the hardware lease. Normally in the past, we budget for, and we would approach the Board of Selectmen for approval to lease a 3-year lease for a technology equipment. We didn't do that this year. Normally what our lease is to keep the one-to-one initiative going so that each student ends with a Chromebook. When the buildings closed on March 13th last year, we needed to get those Chromebooks into the hands of the students as soon as possible. So our purchasing was moved up considerably. Normally we wouldn't have the leasing money to start purchasing the one-to-one initiatives or the other technology that would have been slotted for the leasing. And basically what the leasing is we budget 180,000, but we can spend like 400,000. And we pay that 180 each year, so that 400,000 is paid off over 3 years. Basically, that's what the lease is. All that equipment that we purchase with it is ours to own at the end of it. It's not like we have to give it back. So we have 189,888 dollars that we have, 189,000, yep, that we have in our leasing line that would have gone for the first year's leasing payment. Because we didn't go forward with the leasing, I am asking the board's permission, the committee's permission and the board's permission to move that against the COVID line, where we pre-purchased or purchased at the end of last year all of the Chromebooks that we needed in order to get it out to the students so that everybody had a Chromebook for distance learning. That's the main one. Other than that, there's a small one under facilities for some repairs, transferring equipment to equipment repairs. And then the high school has a small music request to transfer from transportation to instructional material music. And basically what they're doing is saying they normally would travel and play their instruments, but now they're just going to be recording the instruments and presenting in that fashion.
Dawn, can I
That's why
just
we need to
clarify
transfer.
on the leasing piece? This is not to cover the expenses from March. This is to cover the expenses currently for the technology that we've purchased.
Correct, correct.
So therefore, that's why you're asking to move that towards paying the technology that we've purchased this year. Obviously, we had to purchase some in March as well, but this is to support the.
No, most of our purchases came this year by the time we got it. We got our orders in, but we just never got our expenses. We never actually got the computers themselves.
So am I looking at this correctly, that this is internal coverage of some of our COVID expenses? This is
Correct. This
money
would,
that was in the budget?
yes, this would go against the COVID line if approved and would reduce down the expense that we need to cover.
And because of the size of the transfer, it would have to be approved by the board. as a
Correct.
transfer.
Size of the transfer and the fact that it was budgeted for one purpose and we're kind of using it for the same purpose, but not.
Different, but
Right.
yeah.
And Dawn, just to clarify, at least for myself, is that we have to go to the Board of Selectmen to ask permission to lease because
We don't have a balance sheet on our side of the budget. Therefore, we're using the full weight of the budget in order for the leasing company to give us the credit that we need in order to lease the equipment. And that can only be done on the town side. So basically, all leasing agreements are signed by Rudy.
And so just theoretically, the new director of instructional technology may or may not agree with the leasing process for this current year. And so it would either come to an end because he or she would put in $130,000 because that's what their technology needs are for the upcoming year.
Correct.
Putting in a standard leasing amount year after year after year.
Correct. Correct. And at this point, I think we're at a position where the initial purchase of the one-to-one for all students has occurred, and that we're probably going more for turnover, older machines retiring, newer machines coming in. So our purchases should be, for Chromebooks anyway, should be less than what they have been in the past few years. Because we've already bit that bullet and purchased.
But this line could be paying for the new boards that many of our schools need, i.e. the high school or the elementary schools, the VISO boards or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's for any technology that was needed. Right. Correct.
Hey, Dawn, we're using a 3-year lease on these. What's the actual horizon that we're keeping these in play?
We're not using a lease on them.
No, on the Chromebooks.
What's
We're
the
not
life of the
using them.
Chromebook? What's the life of the Chromebook?
The average life of the Chromebooks we look at is 5 years.
Okay.
And Dawn, is that?
But most
it-
of them don't sustain themselves 5 years.
Well,
Yeah, that's my
right.
concern.
They're more around
Physical.
3 with a stretch.
Is it just convention that is it in actuality a lease, or is it a 3-year payment plan?
It's a three-year payment plan with, it's lease to own. Yeah.
Okay. Is it so if there's a problem, say with the Chromebooks in year 1, we can send them back and they'll send us new ones?
No.
No, but we do have all our families that have Chromebooks and usually take out the insurance on them. So if there's a problem with them, I'm sure if there's a manufacturing warranty on them for the first year, whatever, we could definitely do that. But the leasing company is literally just a loan of funds, has
Right.
nothing to do with the actual equipment.
So it's not, it's technically, we're financing the purchase of the computers.
Correct.
We're not technically.
Chromebooks or other technology
Sure.
equipment, right?
Okay.
Whatever is on the list at that time that goes forward.
That we need. Okay. Nice. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on this lease or on transfers in general?
So
COVID expenses.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So procedurally, we're going to bring this to the full board, and the board's going to have to vote on the transfer.
Correct. Update on the COVID expenses unbudgeted.
Okay, let me walk you through the memo here. Most of it is what you're used to seeing, where we have it broken out in two different ways, by department and then also by expenditure. So you could see facilities, nurses, special education, technology, curriculum, and the COVID expenses. This memo is all in, all expenses, no net, no coverage whatsoever. This is everything that's cost us so far, with the exception of any salaries. Salaries are not part of this. This is just what goes through the accounts payable process. Breaking it out, you see supplies, PPEs, partitions, HAZVAC, storage containers, outdoor tents, curriculum, and technology equipment. There's a sentence at the bottom: monies received from grants applied to COVID expenses is $213,733.79. That's the grants that we've received and the offset of some of this $1 million expense that's gone through AP that we have. Some of the grants, do cover some of the salaries. We did apply some of the salaries for the building subs, as well as a little bit of the cost of the liaison that we have with the stipend that he receives. But most of what we're covering here under this 213 is expenditures. If you turn the page, in addition to the expenditures already purchased, the following are additional anticipated expenditures, and this is where some of the salaries come in. So we have the health office paraeducators, building substitutes, possible custodian overtime, COVID stipend for the liaison, and then some more possible expenditures that would go through accounts payable, such as protective supplies, which is your polycarbonate shields for the desks, training materials, technology. That adds up to $1.6 million, and those are anticipated, estimated amounts. School-based COVID-19 relief grants, we have 2 of them. As mentioned in the past, the Elementary Secondary School Education Relief Fund, also known as the SSER, we have applied for and received the grant money for that, and we'll be applying in 2 areas: distance learning platforms, Schoology as part of that grant, as well as $37,000 to cover Chromebooks off of purchase order 211081. The $6,360 is not ours to spend. That's for the non-public schools in Ridgefield to spend. As for the COVID Relief Fund, also known as CRF, we have applied for and been approved for $118,722. We still have not received those funds, but I've listed below what in our application we applied to use the funds towards.
So the 213,000 mentioned at the bottom of your first page is really only 207,000 for our budget, because 6,000 of that is going to non-public schools. Is that correct?
You mean the monies received?
I'm assuming that this 94,000 and 118,000 combined make up the 213,000 that you mentioned on the bottom of page 1?
Actually, no, what makes up that 213,000 is Schoology is part of that. And another technology software application that's part of, I believe, Power School for 37,600.
John, the question's a little bit different, is that 94,454, 118,722 on page 2 of 2 isn't the right, page 1 of 2 doesn't add up. So
It's not, that is not,
It's
no, that,
coincidental, I think.
Okay.
right. There, it's not, that's not that's not the grants themselves. That's, I'm looking, this here, this is monies received from grants that we have applied to the COVID line. If we haven't received the funds for the grants, we can't apply it to the line. This is only funds that we've actually received that we've applied to the $1 million 76.
So the 213 on page 2 is money that we're still going to get, or we anticipate getting?
Money we've already received that we've applied it to that particular ledger line. So we've netted down the expenses based on those monies received, or we've paid for the expenses out of the grants that we've received.
So what would that 213 be on?
The 213 is made up of the 50,475 from the Schoology. There's a 37,618 for New Egg Business. It's another software platform that was needed for distance learning. We received some PPE support from Anthem, 125,640. That makes up the 213,733.
So wouldn't that 125,000 be a school-based COVID relief grant, or why would we not consider that there?
It was a one-time reimbursement from Anthem for COVID reasons that they've issued this money to us. When we received it, it was a split. Most of it had to go back to the individuals, but because we pay, the employer pays a portion of insurance, employee pays a portion, it was split between employer and employee. This is the employer portion for the cost, and it was applied against the PPE purchases.
Maybe not calling it a grant would clear some of the confusion. Maybe call it a refund of medical insurance premium.
I can add another line at the bottom then.
Because we didn't have to apply for that, right? I mean, they said, here's a refund, or?
Correct. We didn't actually apply for it or have to give a specifics as to how we were going to use it, as long as it was used for COVID.
Right. Okay.
Whereas when we do apply at the state, we have to give specifics and we have to apply, attach invoices and all this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, they were a little bit less stringent on it.
So the total for grants and other offsets that we can use for COVID expenses would be?
That we have received.
Have or expect.
Is 213. What we have not received
213
yet
includes the ESSER?
includes ESSER, correct?
Yep.
It does not include the CRF.
Right.
Okay, but it includes the ESSER minus the 6,360 for non-public schools. Got it.
Correct, because that's not ours to spend.
Yep.
So it's picking up the 54,475 and the 37,618. In addition to that is the 125,640 from the Anthem for COVID.
So Dawn, if we take the money that we have in the carryover, which is the 633,542, and we add the grants already received, and we take that off of our total COVID expense, would this be correct? Like we have about 229,000 to find to pay, but then we have in our transfers that will be approved with the board, 189,000. And if we deduct that off, we only need to now go back into our budget and find about $39,000.
Unless you get to the top of page 2.
Yeah, because we're going to have
Go
Yeah.
forward.
the first 3 lines on the top of page 2 are salaries, so they occur each payroll. And as for the cleaning, I don't know where we're going to end up with that. The overtime for the custodians, that could be a reality.
Part of it is like, so for
Part of
example,
it has been already. Yes.
we've had multiple events happening that required people to come in super early or late at night or on the weekends to get it taken care of before the start of the day.
Yeah. So there's 2 areas of tracking. One of them is an easy, hard invoice, if you will. We know the expense. We know what we're going to get hit with. The other is salaries, and that is a little bit more variable. We know who we hired and what the cost is. But some of that was hired specifically for the COVID cause, or the overtime was put aside for the COVID cause. That could go up or it could go down.
Dawn, I wonder if just amending this memo to include the $125,640,000 received from Anthem, or at least if it can be memorialized somewhere.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to put it down under after monies received from grants, and take that grants and make that just the 2, the ESSER ones, and then have a separate line for the refund that came through.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
That would be clear.
But to Rachel's question,
Yep.
we spent about $1 million, and we can basically cover that through grants and other offsets received, what we've put already in the carryover account,
Yep.
and the transfer that is going to come to the board at the next full board meeting. Those things combined basically would cover the already spent, and then we're looking at another 1.6 million of potential additional spending, or expected additional spending throughout the rest of the year.
As of this time, yes.
Yeah.
And at this point, the way things are going, we do. It looks like we would be spending that full 1.6.
I wouldn't
At
count
least.
it off yet.
Right. Now, the 1.6 would be less if we had to be moved to a high risk model. Is that correct?
So if we were to, let me just pull that back up. If we were to move into a remote, I'm just going to put the risk models aside because I think it's even confusing these days. Yeah. If we were to transition into a remote learning environment, yes, the costs of custodial overtime would be significantly reduced. The building subs may or may not be, because although we were not able to hire all of those individuals are expecting to come to work. Once you hire a building sub, they're expected to come to work. And so they would likely be still working, but working through the digital experience, i.e. if someone got sick, that building sub would fill in. The COVID liaison number would continue there. So the additional PPE, the protective supplies, the training materials, and the custodial overtime would be reduced. Those would be and the health office para educators, because those individuals were not hired as permanent folks. So those would be the costs that would be reduced, Jonathan, primarily should we transition into a remote experience.
And also some of the protective supplies and that type of thing.
That would definitely go down. Yeah. So protective supplies, training materials, the cost of custodial overtime would be reduced in the health
Just-
office paras. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I have a question, and I assume
Right.
other parts of the budget might have some offset areas as well if we went fully remote, right? Like utilities and other things like that.
Transportation.
Transportation, yes.
Yeah.
But I think equally challenging that I don't think Dawn is fully prepared to discuss today, but is the food service program in particular at the
Oh,
high
yeah.
school, that we are going to run into a challenge in terms
Yeah.
of meeting our
Oof.
what our typical revenue would be monthly. And so I don't know if Dawn, that's probably something you're going to be discussing at our next meeting.
Yes, I don't have quite, not quite prepared to discuss that now, but it is a concern and it's
Yeah.
something that we're working on to get our arms around at this time. But also keep in mind that while transportation would go down, they, as I had brought to you before, will probably end up with an executive order of some sort should something like that happen.
It would go down, but not go away.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, I just think it's important that we're have an idea of what our potential ask from either within our own budget or to the town may be at this point. And to that, I guess 1.6 would be the worst case if we needed to go back to the town for money at some point this year.
That's hard to say, Jonathan.
Absolutely is.
It all depends. I mean, every week is something different. Things do shift. At this point, the 1.6 is not budgeted and is an expense that we need to watch. As to how much of that 1.6 we're going to have to cover by year end, that's the unknown part.
So
Okay.
Jonathan, if you're asking for a worst case scenario,
Right.
then I what's that, Ken? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say this is current because the worst case could be 2 million, could be 2.2 million.
Yeah.
It could
We
increase.
don't know what's going to happen between now and then, or what we're going to have to do with our schools or our staffing.
The pattern that we're seeing right now falls into those categories. Obviously, this is a pandemic, so who knows what could arise, but they would fall into right now, the pattern seems to be that they fall into those categories. I think the trickiest piece within that category, in my opinion, is that custodial element, because
Makes sense.
what seems logical, all of a sudden, depending upon the scenario that happens, it shifts. And then the substitutes, I could only hope and pray that number would increase, because that might actually mean that I have some to open schools.
Right.
But the truth is we don't have them. And so, as you all know from the numerous emails that you've received over the weekend, that is by far our biggest challenge right now. Maintaining our schools open is being able to staff them appropriately and safely. And so that number, in a perfect scenario right now, in terms of educating kids, would increase because we would have the appropriate subs that we need to staff our schools. But right now, that's just not the case.
Understood.
We're hiring. I'll just
Yeah.
anyone who
We're
needs
trying.
a sub job.
Yeah, I just think we need to be careful with going to the Board of Finance with this is our worst case scenario, because then it causes, then it just is going to cause more explanation if it does come up, if it does go up. They're going to ask and they're going to want to know. So,
And at this point, we
yeah.
could say with what we know at this point, the worst case is, but
Yeah,
we don't know.
Best information we have right now, because everything is subject to change. It's been fluid since the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Should we move on to next item on the agenda? Because it will be on the committee meeting next month as well. Good to move on?
Yep.
Building rentals update.
Okay. In your packet that you received is all of the updates that we've done with our building rental process so far. And what you have before you is a revision of our documents. The front page that you're looking at, the facilities use page, is kind of where we're anticipating going with a change on our websites to give somebody, whoever would be interested in renting our buildings for whatever the purpose may be, an easy area for them to see all of the documentation that they need and all the steps that they need to go through in order to do the renting of the facilities. When we had a conversation with school dude, facility dude, and I get them confused, but anyways, it's a software application that we would use for school building rental so that we could receive all of the applicants' information. We'd be able to set them up as a customer. We would be able to bill them and have a receivable, a receipt from them, or carry it as a receivable going forward. That we didn't have that conversation with the individual, the school solutions, Dude Solutions, which is the parent company of Facility Dudes and School Dudes. And we will be going forward with that. We won't be using general fund in order to do that. We'll be using the building rental fund that we have in order to establish that software setup. When we were working on our fee schedule, we also built in a portion of the fee for the cost of the software on an ongoing basis. Obviously, we have to be careful because we don't know for sure what our rental revenue is going to be. How many, like, obviously this year there's no renting. So if we had no other budget money to cover that, we wouldn't have funds in there in order to cover it going forward. Is this an atypical year? Well, we hope to always have some rental money coming in, and we'll be able to cover it. It looks like on an ongoing basis, the cost of the software is about $12,000. So it's something that is doable to be covered with the administrative fees. Joe will have to just make sure that he has a little bit in his budget in order, in case we don't have the funds in there to cover. We don't want to lose the software contract that we have with them.
That's 12 grand a year, $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot for something you can track on a spreadsheet, but maybe I'm just being.
Same thought I had.
Yeah, I agree, Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've built more complex spreadsheets than what this sounds like for zero. But what is it giving us that we can't track?
It's giving us the ability to track all of the applicants' detail, insurance, and then be able to set them up as a customer and be able to track their expense and their receipts. So our billing that we have, and then the funds that we receive in order to keep the process.
So about eight columns in a spreadsheet, roughly.
So the yes and no. Yes on the columns on the spreadsheet. Yes on that piece. The difference here though is in terms of efficiency. So our current model is that there's many different people that are a part of that process. The paperwork part of that process, it's in some ways very antiquated. There's a lot of folks and a lot of hands within each step. So i.e., if I want to rent Veterans Park, it goes to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but it's all paper. So this would be an there's some ownership on the individual, right? So I'm the one renting the facility now. I'm not calling the school, getting the paperwork. All of it's done digitally as opposed to each school-based person doing that work and cross-checking, because now I have to call and make sure that someone else isn't using that facility. So yes, it's a spreadsheet, Sean, but it's many of them basically on our current process. In addition to that, all the alerts, the reminders, the invoicing, the billing, all gets removed and it becomes part of this one digital platform. So a lot of it could be managed within a spreadsheet, but you'd still need people to manage the spreadsheet in many of them. And we just don't have that ability to do that. So I think if not all of the districts within Durgay, most of them are using this management tool or something like it to be more efficient with the process of renting facilities, invoicing, collecting insurance, making sure that it's accurate, making sure that it follows all of our procedures and protocols, which is now done by way of secretary.
Right. It's very time consuming, and this would make it less time consuming on the employee and more efficient.
I'm just personally, I'm just wary of more subscriptions. We've got a lot of subscriptions and everything's moving to subscriptions, and I get it's being paid for out of that fund, but this sounds like a Google form and a Google spreadsheet and you're done. But maybe I'm just nuts. You type in your information, you upload your insurance form, voila, you're done.
And maybe, Sean, maybe a single point of contact.
Right.
Rather than 8 people managing the process. If one person manages the process, then is that?
And theoretically, it sort of does work that way through Facility Dude, as opposed to the way that we currently have it, where I mean, there's still some approvals that happen because I might have,
Right.
may have not known that that space was going to be utilized for something that was school-based or what have you. And so we want to make sure that the priority is for the schools and not outside of the facilities. So there is still at least the way in which I think the school district is envisioning it, is there still is a process to go through in terms of a checkbox system at the school level, but far more efficient. If this was just one individual, I think navigating this, it could really consume and doing that, making sure the insurance was accurate, making sure that people were invoiced, reminding Bill, all of that. I don't think that we have the staffing for it. So even though it seems like $12,000 is a lot, hiring one person at $60,000 or $50,000 with benefits to manage this, because that's, I think, what it takes. Even though it seems like, yes, I could run a spreadsheet with did you submit this? Did you submit that? When did you get a bill? Did you pay it? All of that. Having one process that does that, sends it out, communicates, and everybody else is responsible for a click and a cross check, I think makes a lot of sense given.
I don't know. Maybe if it wasn't named Dude and didn't sound like it was written by a 14-year-old, I'd think differently or
I'm with
something.
you.
Yeah, anything with a dude at the end usually doesn't work out that well. But I think that this program has been around for a number of years. There's another platform that's called, I think, School Dude, and that's why it's kind of confusing. The School Dude, I think, is used for the athletic programs, to be honest, basically the same kind of mechanism. And then there's the Facility Dude, which is the mechanism that we've been looking at.
So I get why this does sound like it would be a more efficient method of managing this, but I also understand why $1,000 a month sounds like a lot. Can you give us a feel, or give people watching, all the people that choose to watch the recording of this live stream, because we couldn't get the live stream going, on any given month in a normal year, how many times is a building rented out?
I'll throw that over to
For
John.
$1,000, how many rentals are being covered?
I would say the high school is probably, in a given month, is probably every weekend by multiple users, multiple areas. It's an ongoing, I mean, it's a constant thing. It kind of tapers off when you get to the middle schools and less at the elementaries, but the high school is the big user. And we would see a constant flow of requests coming in for the high school. So it would be every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, different hours. Probably it's not unusual for a custodian to put in 17 hours of overtime with RBA or something like that. So it's quite a bit.
Just Joe reminded me of something that their Facility Dude does offer, which is, so for example, right now, if I wanted to rent a classroom and I wanted the table set up a particular way and I needed technology and I needed a space where I could have food in it, let's say, currently that would be all communicated by way of someone either emailing or hard copy or some type of, this would all be communicated to the individuals that needed to know. So if a custodian was going to be there over time, they would know that they needed to have a classroom that's set up with, or find a classroom that has 5 round tables that are, set up separately, and that there's technology, and then technology would be notified as well. So even streamlining those pieces is a aspect that Facility Dude has, that we are now either doing, again, communicating the way we communicate, right? But certainly the efficiency on that end. And if they needed certain type of plugs or access to bathrooms, all of that is done by way of Facility Dude through the ownership of the individual. So it's on me, Susie, that's renting that space to identify all the things that I need, and then it gets communicated out.
Yeah,
You mentioned REA. Would they be a group 1 or a group 2 or a group 3 or a group 4? Where would, just as an example?
They would be B, private for profit, nonprofit organization.
So they would be paying the full fees.
So perhaps, Dawn, Joe, do you want to talk about how you got to these fees? Because these are adjusted, right, from previous year?
Right. We looked at the fee schedule that we had, and if anybody had looked at our facility rental application in the past, there was quite a bit of calculation to come up with what the cost was for any renter of the building. There was a fee for electricity, a fee for lights, a fee for just about any piece, the custodian overtime. If a cafeteria is used, there was a different fee. There was a different piece to everything. What we did is we looked at all of the area fee structures in our DERG area, and we looked at how they, and discussed it with them, and how they came up with their fee schedule. And basically all of them have a fee that is cumulative as opposed to all these individual little pieces. And so we looked at our pieces and what we use to cover the cost of renting a facility, and came up with the breakout as to the different types of groups. And then if you look at the fee schedules in your packet, you'll see that that breaks out into the 3 areas. So like high school obviously is going to be a little more expensive than middle school or elementary school. And we grouped it with like the auditorium, the gymnasium, the cafeteria, a classroom. And to give you an idea, and then obviously the custodial rates is based on contractual obligations. So their collective bargaining agreement and what they receive for their overtime. And so all of that is grouped in to the one fee schedule. And it also included in that is the administrative fee of that for the software program. If I can just give you like some of the areas or some of the individual groups that do rent our buildings. Ridgefield Roadrunners Club of America, Ridgefield Symphony Orchestra, Ridgefield Women's Club, Ridgefield Basketball Association. They're one of our bigger renters, and they rent all the schools. Enhanced Garden School of Dance, Dance Factory, Western Connecticut Youth Orchestra, Ridgefield Youth Wrestling, Ridgefield Youth Football and Cheer, Ridgefield Aquatic Club, Ridgefield VNA, Ridgefield Badminton Club, Ridgefield Little League, RHS Theater, Ridgefield Choral, Rebel Softball, Baseball. I mean, so we have a huge group of individuals who do rent our schools on any given time.
Just about all those sound like group 2, though.
Yeah.
How many in the
These
group 4?
are all billable ones. These are
All of them. Okay.
the ones I just went
So
over.
those aren't town of Ridgefield. They just have Ridgefield in their title.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some of those sound like that, like 501c3s and.
No,
Yeah.
some of those, which is not on this particular list, are like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, the various clubs around town that use them.
Right.
But are 501c3s.
But to Sean's point, some of those that you said did sound like at least they should be set up as 501c3s. Is that
Not necessarily. Some are, some aren't. But unless they can produce a 501c3 number, then they're not considered not for profit.
Do they know this? Do they know that if they produce a 501c3,
Part of the application process?
Okay. Okay, so you said the facility fees, that includes the a portion of that $12,000?
We've added an administrative portion to the fee itself, right? Which
And
would,
do the facility rates on the other page include overtime? Those are the overtime rates?
yeah, if you go
Yeah.
to the second part of the fee schedule, it
Yep.
says facility labor fees. That's the custodian fees.
Right, but those are the overtime rates. They're not the straight time.
Those are time and a half, right?
Time and a half. Okay. The other so the other thing that I was thinking about prior is the group A. So is a school dude going to be tracking what the expenses would have been for group A, even though we're not actually going to be sending them a bill?
Oh, yes. We need to be able to know who's in the school and who's not in the school in order to get everyone scheduled appropriately. So even though they are not a billable customer, they are still
Right.
a customer in the system.
Right, but are we going to know? So, for example, that if they're going to rent the gym, they normally would be $185 if they're per hour. So they rent
Right.
it for 4 hours. There's custodial time. There's all that. So we're going to know at the end that we made a contribution to the town of $1,000 for that event.
Yes,
we
because
will
we
be able
still
to
need,
track it.
right, exactly, because we still need to pay the custodians whether or not we're
Right.
receiving a customer's reimbursement.
Right.
So-
So
Yeah, so it would be, in my mind, I'm thinking what you're asking, Ken, is in facility do I see nonprofit 16 hours auditorium, and then 16 hours multiplied by 185, that total cost, even though they're actually not charged that money,
yes.
that's the contribution that we're giving back to our community.
Yes. Because at the end of the year, I would like to say, for this last school year, we gave $500,000 back to the community in the use of our facilities, because there's just, as going through like these last budget process, I heard a lot of what the town's doing for the schools, and I didn't hear any conversation about this. That
We need to be careful about that, Ken, because the town owns the buildings. So
Mhm.
technically, the town is renting
The
or
town's
just
not
facilitating
paying the
it.
custodial overtime. That's
No,
coming out
Right,
of
they're not paying
we're
custodial
facilitating
overtime.
it.
They're not paying. So
Overhead.
however we want to do it, there is a contribution that the school is making back to the town,
even if it's just on the labor side.
even if it's just on the labor side.
And don't
For this
forget,
first year, we're gonna track that.
as we move forward with this, we're designing this, the online portion of this. So it's going to be tailored to everything that we need. So we definitely will tell them to basically bill it out as you normally would. And then at the end, of course, it'd be a different figure. But that way we'd be able to track, the amount per auditorium or whatever like that. So we definitely will make sure that they have that in there.
So
So-
I have a question. I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Go ahead.
I forgot this isn't my meeting. Your turn.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So because Ken brought up a good question about the nonprofits. So right now, if let's say it's 4 hours, let's just keep it simple. If we have a nonprofit that's 4 hours using the auditorium, that's costing the operating budget, let's just say, right? Could be potentially $800 or around that amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that the question's going to come up, if not today, because I know we're short on time, next time, of why we have a balance in that building rental. Should that money not be used to contribute towards I don't know, should there be a balance there or what have you to contribute towards the cost of the custodial overtime, so it's not hitting the operating budget?
I think that's where the challenge comes from, because then what you're doing is you're charging the other groups more to pay for the nonprofit groups. And is
Yeah.
that the way that it should be done? So,
Right.
yeah, that's the question. I don't think so.
And my question was to this fee schedule.
Yep.
With this fee schedule, with our normal year usage of the buildings, would this maintain and not a growing balance in the building rentals line, but it maintain a number in that line and cover the costs of the nonprofit use, or would it be still growing or something else?
Hmm.
When we built the fee structure, it's to maintain but not to grow.
Maintain a balance. After paying,
Maintain the coverage of the facility's use for the groups renting, not necessarily covering non-for-profits, covering their cost of renting the building, overhead, custodian, and whatnot, but not growing.
so we could maintain a low balance in the building rentals account.
Mhm. The question is, what is the best balance to have in there?
That we, just being mindful of time, do we want to wrap up building rentals and start the conversation on athletics fund, or do we have, it's already 8:15. Do we need to table that last item for the next committee? Being mindful of everyone's time.
I don't think we got very far on athletics. There's some conversations that we're still working through, and we're just going to provide a very brief update on where we were. So
Okay.
Dawn, or where we are. Dawn, do you want to just give it? Just for the
Sure. Just to give everyone an idea, just so that we know we're moving forward and not putting things off. We've started having a conversation with the athletic director, the principal of the high school, Dr. Silva, myself. We've put together some thought processes and some possible changes to the athletic fund. I've also passed some of our ideas through the auditor to make sure that we're on the right track and that she doesn't have any problems with the reporting side of that in the CAFR. And we're really at the very infancy stage of that, but we have started the discussions. We've had a couple of meetings, and we'll be hopefully coming up with some ideas to bring back to the committee as a whole for your thoughts. That's it.
Great. Questions, comments, thoughts? All right. Thank you all very much. I think we are right on time. We have a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I
I wonder if
second.
Sean or Rachel, Rachel does second. Okay, all in favor of adjourning? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.